All right, so pulled my front axle out of my truck on my last wheeling trip. I started having problems with the front springs popping out. So I pulled the axle out, I got it sitting right here, getting ready to cut all the brackets off. I'd put these on here, I don't know, probably 12, 13 years ago when I originally did the 3-link on this truck. So going back with basically the same thing, but just cleaning it up. I'm gonna redo the coil bucket so it'll actually retain it. So start by cutting all these brackets off of here. Alright, so got all the brackets cut off the axle. So now it's ready for the new brackets I designed. I just got to cut them on my plasma table. And then right here, years ago I broke off the breather, so I couldn't extend the diff on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap that out for an MPT thread and then put a little 90 on it coming out the back so that I can put a breather on there that I haven't ran since I put this axle on the truck. So next is going to be that MPT, and then we'll start on the brackets. Alright, so got my NPT fitting in there. Just used a 1/8 inch NPT tap that, got a piece there, and then I'll just have a 1/4 inch barb coming out that I can put a line on to extend my breather. So then next is hopefully all my drawings right, and I can start cutting the truss. So I will start cutting the truss next. Alright, so here's the pieces that I cut on the plasma table that make up all the brackets for that front axle. So next we'll get them cleaned up and start assembling. So actually pretty impressed because this is the first time I've actually cut 1/4 inch steel with this. So I get these all cleaned up out of the table and start on putting them together on the axle. Alright, so these are the pieces that make up the passenger side lower control arm mount. It's upside down, obviously spring goes there. The axle tube, it's cut at an angle for, since I got 10 degrees of taper on them, running them to the axle, or from the axle up to the frame, narrows. So I cut a spacer and put it in here to make sure I keep it wide enough. So when I do put a joint in here, it actually is going to be able to fit after I weld it. So it'll hold it wide enough so it'll be easy to put that in there. So then these are the shock tabs. They'll get mounted. These get welded up onto here next. So I'm not going to really do much on that. So I'll tack weld this up and then locate on that axle, and then I'll start on the track bar and then continue on. Alright, so here's the frame, or the axle side track bar mount. Slide up. I forgot to put a couple of the tabs on here to hold this piece on. Normally they all tab together, but the same deal, put a bolt in here that's just a little bit wider than the Heim joint that'll go in there. To keep it from pulling when I weld it together. So I'll tack weld this together and then start putting these on the axle. So I built some new lower links for the truck. So I'm using, this is 2 inch by 1/4 inch wall tubing that cut down to length, and using the Johnny joints on each end, and then each side drilled 2 little holes in it for rosin welding those in. So I got them tack welded on right now to test fit it on the truck. My old links were these guys right here. So they're actually 2 inch square tubing, and I used rubber bushing on the one side, and they're, I don't know, about 13 years old now on the truck. I've been running them, but you can notice that especially the one on the top, which was the passenger side one, has a slight bow into it, a little bit more, where I actually started to bend it. So they held up pretty well. So we'll see how these 2 inch ones hold up, and see how these work underneath the truck. So next, get this axle under there mounted and make sure all the brackets clear when I articulate the truck. Alright, so I got the axle underneath the truck, mounts kind of in, just to check the clearance, make sure everything fit. Obviously this is basically at full compression. It really can't go this high to make everything fit, but obviously look up in here, you can see just how tight it is to get everything to clear. It just touches right at full bump for my brace for my track bar mount. But everything else clears. Obviously one of my measurements must have been off, so I had to redo the track bar. I need to move it over to the driver's side about 1.5 inches so that I can get the axle so it'll actually center upright and keep the track bar at the same length. But it obviously comes up and clears. I mean, it's a 14-inch travel shock, so I'll have a little bit of shock shaft showing once it gets bolted back on, and then the limit strap mount behind it. But this will end up bolting right into here, like so. To be determined if that's going to be the right length or not. So I'll go ahead and take the truck down to full drop and show that. I've cycled it turning left and right at full bump, full drop, done all the clearances. Everything seems to clear. Obviously, if I was trying to run like a hydraulic steering assist or something, make it even more complicated, or trying to do a true high steer, it just doesn't clear. It'd take a ton of work to make everything re-clear. So I'll go ahead and drop this down and give you an idea on what that is. I also need to move this bolt here on this upper link. I just got a pin in it right now because I made it just a little bit too tight for that to clear everything. So I'm just going to move that bolt back 1/4 inch and up 1/4 inch, and that joint will clear everything, and then go from there. So I'll show it at full drop so you get an idea how much travel it has. So here it is, full drop. Obviously it moves pretty far. This is a lot farther than it can actually go. As you can see, like the limit strap is already like 2 inches short on this side. The shock would be limited out about right there. And then if you go onto this side, that can travel, the driver's side can travel a lot farther. I mean, it's 3 or 4 inches below the shock and 5 or 6 inches right here farther down than where the limit strap's at. So, and then like once I put that spring in there, I mean, the spring's already too short, so by the time I do that and lock the bottom in, it'll keep it all in place. So next up, I'll redraw that track bar, move it over that 1.5 inches so I can get it all squared away where I need it to go, and then redo that upper mount, those little tabs on there, get those all replaced, and I'm happy with everything else. So let's pull it all apart, put those in, and then fully weld everything, and then put in all the few bracket tabs I got missing that are for holding the coil springs in and whatnot, that don't really affect anything right now, so I didn't put them in. But I'll get all those cut, get those all welded on. So next we'll be having the whole thing buttoned up and welded up and get ready to put it back under the truck. I pulled my coil bucket off because I found it was loose, and I found it all cracked through here, up through here, little crack here, coming down through here, and this is all cracked all the way through that big hole right there too. So I had to leave the truck for a while, so I threw a couple tacks, just kind of help hold it in place while I was on jack stands. So I'm drilling holes on each of the crack points here. I'm gonna open them up a little bit with the grinder, beat this back flat, and then when I weld it all back together, I'm gonna put a plate around behind here that I'll weld also all this into. Probably put a couple of rosin welds on there and weld it back in. So that's next. So I hammered that back kind of flat in here, drilled some holes in here, and then these will get welded shut into some of the cracks, like here and here, here. And these are like a rosin weld. So what I'm gonna do is put this piece around the back inside of here, like so, and then I'll weld it through those holes to tighten it up, to weld on there, and then fill in the rosin welds, and then this hole here, and then this hole, once I get the coil bucket back on, I'll re-drill through, and that will mount that all. So now I got that piece in, and now I'm just gonna weld it all up. So I welded up all the cracks, ground them smooth, and then in behind I put a piece of 10 gauge steel back here, kind of wraps around in here, and put some welds on the back side where I could reach, and then a couple of rosin welds throughout there. This chunk up here of the frame, just I don't know where it went, it fell out and must have swept it up and tossed it. So I re-drilled the holes too where the bucket mounts. So now I'm going to take and give this quick coat of paint and then get the bucket mounted back up. Coil bucket's back in, installed. So I tighten it all back up, all new grade 8 hardware inside to bolt it all on. So the next part to do is put the axle back underneath. Everything's back in here. The limit strap ties in. Keep it out. The spring will fall down about an inch from up here, a little more, but it's locked in. There's a plate right here that the spring passes through that's tied through the middle to hold the spring in so it doesn't fall out. So now I'll put the tire on, make sure the track bar centers up, and we're good to go.